The most commonly asked questions about A Course in Miracles, question 22. Chapter 2, the nature of the separation. 22. What happens when we die and where do we go? Are the near-death experiences that many people report relevant to students of A Course in Miracles? The transition to death can be likened to the following. 1. Shifting from one sleeping dream to another. 2. Completing the viewing of one videotape and beginning another. 3. Changing channels from one television station to another at the completion of a program, or even before its completion, if one so chooses. Or finally 4. Leaving one room and going into another, as was taught by the great 19th century Indian sage Ramakrishna. Since consciousness is inherent in the split mind and not found in the brain or body, although it is experienced there, physical death is but an illusion of an end to one's mental state, which is retained at death. Despite this thought of separation being projected onto the body, it still remains within its source, the wrong mind. Therefore, one does not go anywhere at death. Returning to the analogy of changing television channels, one physically remains in the living room chair, even though one's attention is shifted from the location seen on one television channel to another. Moreover, it is important to realize that what we call death does not bring about a state of enlightenment or peace. If one does not complete the letting go of the ego's thought system in its entirety, thereby letting go of the wrong mind, enlightenment or resurrection cannot be obtainable. In fact, Jesus specifically cautions against such an escapist view of death. What could you choose between but life or death, waking or sleeping, peace or war, your dreams or your reality? There is a risk of thinking death is peace because the world equates the body with the self, which God created. Yet a thing can never be its opposite. And death is the opposite to peace, because it is the opposite of life. And life is peace. Awaken the meaning of resurrection, and forget all thoughts of death, and you find you will have the peace of God. A recent variation of this belief that physical death brings freedom or release from the body is found in many people's near-death experiences, and questions about these experiences are often raised during our classes and workshops. The reports usually include the person's experience of leaving the body and proceeding through a dark tunnel to a circle or being of light, often identified as Jesus. This all-loving, gentle presence sometimes reviews the life with the person and sends the person back to complete lessons, accept certain responsibilities, or assume an important function, always a favourite of the ego's specialist needs. It is not for anyone to judge these near-death experiences, and it would be foolish to deny the very positive effects such experiences have had for people. However, one can comment on the theology of such experiences and the conclusions drawn from them about the meaning of life, death, and the so-called afterlife or life after life. The reader must keep in mind that A Course in Miracles states quite clearly that the mind is not in the body, though it certainly can appear otherwise. For example, from the workbook, the mind can think it sleeps, but that is all. It cannot change what is its waking state. It cannot make a body, nor abide within a body. What is alien to the mind does not exist, because it has no source. What seems to be the opposite of life is merely sleeping. When the mind elects to be what it is not, the body, and to assume an alien power which it does not have, a foreign state, the body, it cannot enter a false condition not within its source. It merely seems to go to sleep a while. It dreams of a time, an interval, in which what seems to happen never has occurred. The changes wrought are substanceless, and all events are nowhere. When the mind awakes, it but continues as it always was. And from beyond the body in the text, the home of vengeance, the body, is not yours. The place you set aside to house your hate is not a prison, but an illusion of yourself. The body is a limit imposed on the universal communication that is an eternal property of mind. But the communication is internal. Mind reaches to itself. It is not made up of different parts which reach each other. It does not go out. Within itself, mind has no limits, and there is nothing else outside of it. It encompasses everything. It encompasses you entirely, you within it, and it within you. There is nothing else anywhere or ever. Therefore, when we consider such near-death experiences from perspective of A Course in Miracles, we can see that they make no sense on the level of form. How can one leave one's body, travel through a tunnel, and greet a great light, if one were never in the body in the first place? Remember that the self remains in the mind and not the body, just as a dreamer's self is not in the dream, though parts of this self are reflected there. Again, this is not to deny or invalidate a personal experience, but it is to say that however valid an experience is for the person, the interpretation is purely subjective and should not be taken for objective truth. For example, everyone experiences the sun as rising and setting every day, and many people report very significant Asiatic and even spiritual feelings associated with sunrises and sunsets. And yet we know scientifically that the sun does not rise or set, but rather it is the earth that does the movement, rotating on its axis and revolving around the sun. The experience is contrary to the true explanation. Similarly, we all experience the earth as flat as we go through our daily lives, even though we understand intellectually that it is round. And so, one's experience of a near-death occurrence, or of to a place one goes upon death or near death, does not necessarily mean that what is understood as the experience is what truly is. And again, when one looks at such experiences through the lens of A Course in Miracles, one would understand them quite differently. Expressions of forgiveness that were projected from the mind onto the body and its world of life, death, and near death. As we have seen, therefore, there cannot in truth be an out-of-body experience, since the mind was never in the body to begin with, and so the mind cannot leave the body, travel through a tunnel, and meet with Jesus after having left the body. Moreover, there is a danger in believing this way because it strongly suggests, as do many people who have had such an experience, that such peace, joy, and happiness can only come to a person after having died and left the body. The whole focus of A Course in Miracles is on choosing and having a holy instant right now, on choosing Jesus or the Holy Spirit instead of the ego. One does not have to die to go to heaven, since heaven is an awareness of perfect oneness within the mind, and nothing else besides that. The wonderful experience of forgiveness that is frequently reported can be had in a holy instant again, without having left the body, going through a tunnel, etc. Holding up to near-death experiences to be idealized and sought for, as was depicted in the popular movie in the 90s Flatliners, actually serves well the ego's fundamental strategy of first making the body real, and then turning it into kind of a repulsive thing. This sets up a situation in which people would wish to be free of its prison of darkness, yearning to escape in the non-corporeal light, and all the while the ego's thought system of separation, guilt, and specialness nestles comfortably in the mind. Protected by the belief that there is indeed a body that is real, and one that truly exists in the physical world. Thus, believing in the reality of such experiences is the very compromise with the truth, giving light and darkness equal power and reality, that Jesus cautions against in A Course in Miracles. We see a clear statement of such caution in the section on death in the Manual for Teachers, and we quote from this extremely important passage now. It begins with reference to the standard religious belief that upon death the soul is free to return to God, or to continue on its journey, as in the Catholic doctrine of purgatory. However, the contemporary interest in near-death experiences, as we have just seen, falls into the same category of not realizing or recognizing the illusory nature of the entire physical universe and of individual existence, body, mind, and what is mistakenly referred to as spirit. The curious belief that there is a part of dying things, i.e. a soul or life force, that may go on apart from what will die, does not proclaim a loving God nor re-establish any grounds for trust. If death is real for anything, there is no life. Death denies life. But if there is reality in life, death is denied. No compromise in this is possible. There is either a God of fear or one of love. The world attempts 1,000 compromises and will attempt 1,000 more. Not one can be acceptable to God's teachers, because not one can be acceptable to God. He did not make death, and because he did not make fear. Both are equally meaningless to him. The reality of death is firmly rooted in the belief that God's Son is a body, and if God created bodies, death would indeed be real, but God would not be loving. There is no point now at which the contrast between the perception of the real world and that of the world of illusions becomes more sharply evident. And the last to be overcome will be death, the famous statement of St. Paul from his first letter to the Corinthians church, 15:26. Of course. Without the idea of death there is no world. All dreams will end with this one. This is salvation's final goal, the end of all illusions, and in death are all illusions born. What can be born of death and still have life? But what is born of God and can still die? The inconsistencies, the compromises, and the rituals the world fosters in its vain attempts to cling to death, and yet to think love real, are mindless magic, ineffectual and meaningless. God is, and in him all created things must be eternal. Do you not see that otherwise he has an opposite, and fear would be as real as love? Teacher of God, your one assignment could be stated thus: accept no compromise in which death plays a part. Do not believe in cruelty, nor let attack conceal the truth from you. What seems to die, the body that had been alive, has been misperceived and carried to illusion. Now it becomes your task to let the illusion be carried to the truth. Be steadfast in this. Be not deceived by the reality of any changing form. Truth neither moves nor wavers, nor sinks down to death and dissolution. And what is the end of death? Nothing but this: the realization that the Son of God is guiltless now and forever. Nothing but this. But do not let yourself forget it is not less than this. In conclusion, therefore, we can understand that anything that seems to live and then die, that changes, grows, and subsequently deteriorates, or that appears to be separate from others, cannot be of God, and therefore cannot be real. And so all categories that relate to bodies in any way, including death and near death, have no true meaning because they do not truly exist. Their only meaning within the illusion comes in their serving as classrooms in which we learn the lesson of discerning between the meaningless and the meaningful.